We need more diversity. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now today I am going to be doing a video where I'm going to be talking about all the Asian books that I have binge read in the past 2 weeks. And the reason why I did this is because if you didn't know, May was actually Asian Heritage Month here in Canada, as well as Asian Heritage and Pacific American Month in United States. And there's actually an Asian readathon that was being hosted by, I believe, Read with Cindy here on BookTube that I actually didn't take part in. No. Are we shocked and surprised that me as a booktuber doesn't take part in actually things that are trending in the booktube community? I am not surprised because I don't really consider myself as a professional booktuber yet, even though it's going to be my 1 year. I still have no idea what I'm doing here on this channel. But with the talk of diversity and the push for diversity in publishing and people of color voices being heard in the community, I also took a look at my shelves and I took a look at all the books that I read this year, and I realized that there is very little representation of me and my fellow Asians out there. And I have been a reader for such a long time now, and I have been talking to my friends, I've been talking to my family, I've been talking to a lot of people who would actually listen and hear me, that I need to see more representation. I need to see me in the books. I want a romance that's set in an Asian country. I want a romance that has a Chinese American in it. I want a romance that is first generation immigrant problems galore so that I can relate to it. And in order for us to have this kind of change, I can't just expect that the publishing gods will understand my need without ever voicing it to the world on social media. I need to actually talk about it. I actually need to buy the books, or I need to actually push the books to my followers that will listen to me. And the reason why change actually happens is actually if you do something about it. With that being said, I'm actually going to be doing my best to read as diversely as possible for the next couple of months in here 2020. Forget next couple of months, the whole entire year, the whole rest of my life. I'm going to be supporting Asian voices. I'm going to supporting people of color voices and minority voices, because these voices do need to be heard in a sea of romances that are filled with characters that either look the same, sound the same, or act the same way. No offense to all the romance books that I've read and I've actually really enjoyed. The second thing I want to talk about is that this channel right here, there is going to be a shocking surprise to you, but basically, I am Asian. I never really acknowledged that I'm Asian, and I never really embraced my culture here. I never really talked about the things that I really enjoyed. I never really talked about my Asian culture and everything aside from maybe the Lunar New Year readathon that I hosted with my friend Lacey. I never really discussed about my culture, and I never really discussed about Asian voices. I never really discussed about the Asian things that I liked. And you will slowly start to see me change and slowly start to see my culture kind of bleeding through with the Asian books that I'm reading, with the Asian dramas I'm going to be talking about, and basically with everything that I actually enjoy and my hobby. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I took a step back and I realized that my personality here on BookTube and what I talk about here on BookTube is very catered to a certain audience. It's an audience where people can easily understand and easily relate to. I don't talk about K-pop because I know that not a lot of my viewers actually like K-pop. I don't talk about K-dramas because I know it's very specific niche. With that being said, for this readathon, I decided to pick up a lot of East Asian authors because I realized that while I do read Asian voices, I normally don't read a lot of East Asian voices for some reason. I don't understand. Sometimes I see a Chinese American novel out there, but for some reason it doesn't capture my attention because it's not either the pure contemporary romance that I want to crave, thriller, or a mystery novel, and something that is not really within my genre. But for this readathon, I decided to expand outside of my genres that I typically read, and I read middle grade, I read some adult fiction, and I also read some poetry, and it was glorious. And just a heads up, this intro right here is actually filmed 2 weeks after I filmed my Asian wrap-up, mostly because my intro was completely garbage, so you will see some differences in the lighting and also my makeup. But without further ado, let's talk about all the Asian novels that I've read for the Asian readathon. So the first book that I read for the Asian readathon is The Only Child by So Mi-hae, and this is actually a Korean novel that was translated into English because I guess it was very popular in Korea and the Americans really wanted to read about it. So I'm very thrilled because I love books that have been translated. So this is actually a thriller novel about a serial killer and I believe a psychiatrist and also the psychiatrist's husband and his child that was from a previous marriage. So how do these all four characters kind of tie in with each other is basically the premise of this story and this thriller. So the serial killer has been caught and has been imprisoned, but his last wishes are to talk to the psychiatrist and for the serial killer to kind of confess his crimes to the psychiatrist. And our psychiatrist is our main female character. She's kind of really confused why the serial killer is talking to her specifically. And when she's back at home, she realizes that her husband's child might be a little bit different and might be someone that she can't actually trust because of the way that she changes her emotions very quickly to play to her advantage, and basically creepy child things like that. So if you guys are into thriller novels with creepy children and also with the serial killer aspect to it, you'll definitely enjoy this one. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars because I really liked the take of it. I really liked the serial killer aspect of it, and I love the diversity towards like the relationships and things like that. And also the twist at the end was something that I did not expect one bit, and I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend this one to you. So the next novel that I read was Mindy Kim and the Yummy Seaweed Business, and this is a middle grade novel. I don't even think it's a middle grade novel. I think this is more like an elementary school novel. So if you have young readers out there, definitely pick up Mindy Kim, because Mindy Kim by Lila Lee, the whole series is fantastic. It talks about some really serious issues that I never knew. So if you didn't know, I also read Mindy Kim's Lunar New Year Parade back during our Lunar New Year readathon, and that book literally brought me to tears when I was going to work because I was reading it. It just took an hour to read, by the way. So when I was reading it to work, I was like tearing up because I did not expect this like one plot line to happen. And it brought me to tears because it was just so powerful. It was so emotional and I loved it. Lila Lee does an amazing job talking about grief, about the love of a lost one. She also makes it lighthearted by talking about, you know, middle school problems and making friends and being different in a class full of people that don't look like you. And it was just beautiful, and I definitely recommend this Seaweed Business book to you and also the entire series to read to your young children. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars because I was listening to the audiobook of it during work, and I think because it was only 3 hours long and I listened to 3 times the speed, I didn't really get to absorb the story as much as I wanted to, so I actually ended up purchasing a copy of it so that I could do a quick reread. So the next book that I read was Frontdesk by Kelly Yang, and Frontdesk is a very popular middle grade novel that I didn't know that was very popular because simply I don't read a lot of middle grade novels, but this year I have been making an effort to move into different genres and different levels of reading to really expand my reading. If you are turned off by the idea of middle grade novels, I highly recommend you to try it because middle grade novels right now are not leaving any survivors behind. They are talking about the hard-hitting issues. They are talking about racism. They're talking about immigration. They're talking about racial profiling. They're talking about things that nobody talks about in YA. Nobody talks about in romance because they think that that's taboo. They think that's obscure. They think that that's something that is not something to be talked about. But middle grade novels do talk about it, and they do educate young readers that this is real life and these are the things that are happening in real life. But these are also the things that you can look at from a different perspective to be more positive and to actually make a change about it. So Frontdesk by Kelly Yang is a book about a Chinese immigrant family that came to America hoping for a better life. They came from distinct professions like engineering and from like businesses of their own, and they were doing very well in China. But once they come to America, they realize that they don't have the profession that they want anymore. They are put into jobs that don't make sense because their education is not being recognized, the professional work experience is not being recognized. So this tells a story of a little girl and her family literally living in poverty after immigrating from China to America and working at a hotel where they clean up the rooms and they check people in. This book also talked about racism within the Asian communities. So if you think that all of China or all of different countries near China are friends along with each other because we look like each other, that is definitely not the case. There is racism within our community, even though we identify ourselves as Chinese. And if we talk in the same dialects, it does not mean that we do not have racism within our Asian communities as well. It also talked about racism in the general community. It talked about racism through Asians and Blacks, and from also police racial profiling. That was very shocking to read in a middle grade novel, but hey, you know what? I'm a new reader and I'm down for it. It talked about our main character's friend being Black. It talked about our main character's family basically hiding immigrants because they've been stripped of their rights and things like that. And it's very important for us to learn and to read from different perspectives of immigrant families and also from different races. And Kelly Yang did a beautiful job at it. I was very shocked when I listened to the author's note, and she talked about how basically all the experiences that were very troubling to me to read in this middle grade novel were experiences that actually happened in real life, and that she was just drawing on from her real experiences. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and it's definitely a book that I really needed to read when I was a child. But I'm happy that my children in the future can see more diversity in their reads, and that I'm really happy that the generation right now that is currently reading these middle grade novels are seeing the changes being made. So the next book that I read was When the Emperor Was Deveined by Julie Otsuka. And now this is a Japanese American story set in the times when it was World War II and the bombing of Pearl Harbor happened in America, and when the Japanese Americans were taken into the internment camps where they were basically forced to leave their homes and leave their jobs and leave their families at times, and to basically be questioned and always imprisoned and always done everything that was bad during that time. I'm sure we already know. And this book took on a different perspective of where they painted it like everything was okay. And the author wrote it in such a fluid way, such a nice way, where you're kind of like, oh, it just sounds like that the family's just going on a trip because it's the summer and they're enjoying themselves. They're cleaning up the house, they're putting food out for their dogs, they're doing all this stuff. They're stocking up on food because they want to take it to wherever they're going for vacation. So everything is kind of like, oh, this is a nice story, but there's always an undertone of something bad is happening, something wrong is happening, and something that is very troubling that is happening. Because this book also follows the perspectives of like 2 little children, and these 2 little children don't know where their dad is, and they think that their dad is constantly going on business trips by moving to different parts of America. And he always talks about the weather being nice, but he never talks about anything else. And it was just so upsetting to read at times, and it was hard to read at times, but it was definitely lighter than any other novel that I could have picked to talk about Japanese intermittent camps. And it was a touching story, and the ending completely broke my heart, and I ended up crying because it was just so sad to read. I highly recommend you to read this book if you want to learn more about Japanese internment camps. So the next book that I read was Inside Out and Back Again by Tahan Lai. Now this book is a Vietnamese American book about immigrants coming from Vietnam, and they're moving into America, and then their personal immigrant struggles and the problems that they have to face. Once again, we're talking about characters that are fish out of water, that are seeing people that don't look like them, and these are the people that are being mistreated about their race and also just being mistreated in general. This also talks about during the historical time periods of like they had to escape the Vietnam War because they were basically destroying their country and they were escaping their enemies, and it was just a very heartbreaking novel. I found the story to be extremely beautiful a lot of the times because it was written kind of like in verse, and it was written really smoothly, and it made me understand a lot of parts of the immigrant struggle that I didn't learn about in school, or I didn't learn about through my family, because my family doesn't really talk about the immigrant status, and I never really asked much about it. So I really appreciated this book, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I want to talk about is also a Japanese American novel by the same author, Julie Otsuka, and it's called The Buddha in the Attic. And this is a book that I've never, this is a book that's talking about an experience that I've never heard about before, and that completely blows my mind because it's something so new to me. But basically there is this thing called picture brides that were happening in America before the World Wars, and this was where a time where Japanese people would send a photo of themselves to someone in America, and then someone from America would send a photo back to them, and then they will kind of like match make themselves, and then they would think that like these people are good looking, you know, they're bankers, they make a lot of money, they can provide a wealth that I would never see in Japan. So they make the move to America and to meet these husbands that they plan to marry. And often at times those photos of the males are completely catfishing, and they don't look exactly like the photo. They look uglier, or they look older, they look different in general. And it was upsetting to them as well, to these Japanese immigrants, because these people often lie about their wealth and basically own farms, and basically use these Japanese brides as free labor work, and to have them work in the fields and to like do everything that they would have done by themselves. And this story talked about their struggles of moving into a country that people don't respect you, that you've been lied to about your freedom, and that people just use your body whenever they feel like it. So this book does include a lot of like sexual trigger warnings, that if you're not comfortable enough to read about like experiences like this, then definitely I recommend you to not pick up this book. I picked this book up without knowing, so it was a shock to me when I was reading it, but it wasn't something that was too graphic for me to not stomach. It was okay, and I listened to it. I heard the pain and the struggles of these smart Japanese immigrants, and I loved it so much. And it also bled in perfectly to the time when the war was happening, and that's when the internment camps started happening. So the last book that I want to talk about is a book that has been seen across Bookstagram all the time, and I wonder why it's being seen across Instagram. And I think it's because it's very relatable to what's actually happening in the world right now. So this book is called Severence by Lin Ma. And basically this book is a book about a world where a mysterious airborne disease, or like it's just a disease or an illness that is spreading across the world, and people are getting sick, and people are dying, they're having trouble breathing, and people have to wear N95 masks out, they have to wear surgical masks out to protect themselves, and everybody's staying away from each other. And this disease just so happened to be originated from China. And so this book talks about something that is literally happening right now in our world, in our society right now. And it's talking about an Asian girl who has to deal with this, and also has to deal with her own relationships. And this book, while it was interesting, it talked a lot about character motivations, and it was a very character-driven novel. So what I mean by that is that basically there's nothing really happening in the plot, and it only focuses on our characters' growth and development throughout the story. She becomes pregnant, and she has to take care of her pregnant belly, but also navigating her relationships, because she doesn't want to be with the baby's father, or she doesn't want to be with just one person. You don't really see her develop romantic experiences. What I found very powerful about this book, and what I found really interesting about this book, was that it was a direct, like kind of like a copy C and V of like my Chinese family immigrant experience. Like they talked about WeChat. Like, if you know WeChat, comment down below. They also talked about like, you know, people making the grand decision of moving to America, of moving to a place that is better, but only to think like, maybe I should have moved back, maybe I should have stayed back in China, and things like that. And that was very powerful and touching to me. Unfortunately, the story just didn't really connect with me as much, because it was a character-driven novel and nothing was happening. I was kind of bored. So I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. So anyways, that is it for my conversation to do with Asian diversity here on BookTube, and what I'm planning to do here on my BookTube channel, and also all the books that I've read for my mini Asian readathon. I also wanted to say that I will not only just be talking about East Asian novels, and that I will be reading a lot of more South Asian novels as well, and to talk more about people of color here on my BookTube channel, and talk more about diversity in books. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and you had recommendations added to your shelves. I'm also starting a Asian books shelf on my Goodreads that I'll link down below, that you can check out, of all the books that include Asian characters, or all the books that are written by Asian authors, so that you can read more about Asian voices. And anyways, that is it for this video, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.